Welcome to Astounding Talk Radio with Reggie Stearns. Join us as we explore the how and the why and the forces that shape and mold our world. Talk radio is so astounding, there's no frequency to contain it. Hi, I'm Reggie Stearns, and thanks for joining us on Astounding Talk Radio. On today's show, we're speaking with the co-author of Conquering the Electron, Eric Bach. His new book is about the people and the drama behind a lot of the technology which we take for granted today. On this show, we talk a little bit about the guy who's attributed to inventing the volt, the guy who invented the battery. We hit on Edison and Tesla, and the guy who brought about Silicon Valley. Anyway, before we get going, don't forget you can find us on all the social sites, and this show can be found on astoundingtalk.com/14105. All right, with that, let's just jump into the show. We're pleased to have with us Eric Bach, co-author of Conquering the Electron, which was released this month. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, Eric, I was looking through the book today. Fascinating read, actually. And perfect timing, I think, given the holidays are coming, because as I read through the book, it's both, I'm kind of a technical geek myself. I really enjoyed it, but I see that it's written for people like myself and just your casual reader. I think it'd be good for people at Christmas time as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Sure, absolutely. I think your characterization of it is spot on. Accessible and fun for everybody. You don't need a background in hard science to enjoy Conquering the Electron, which is really what we were going for. Yeah. We came from a pair of backgrounds. Derek has a background as an engineer, an electrical engineer, and myself, I don't. I just came in with the writing chops. So we really aimed for something that would be entertaining for those folks who did want a kind of technical expertise and technical exploration of the topic, but also could be totally accessible and enjoyable for, all sorts of regular folks just like us.
As we start the show, can you tell us first a little bit more about the book, and then go into yourself and Dr. Cheung's history and why you guys wrote the book?
Oh, sure, absolutely. The book, I like to describe it as kind of a mashup of how stuff works and TMZ. You get the whole story of the telephone, television, computers, radar, all these inventions that touch our lives every day, and we, don't even really think about how they work or the people who invented them, the stories of their creation, or how each invention inexorably kind of led to the next. And this book sort of demystifies all of that. And at the same time, it kind of gets rid of the hero worship that all too often pervades our thinking. You think about founding fathers or these great lights or these great technologists of years past, and we tend to deify them, and we forget they're people just like you and me. And they have their own foibles, they have their own great aspects, and they have their own failings. And so, getting to know that these incredible geniuses and visionaries did, the same dumb stuff as your uncle, is kind of a neat thing. And now as far, you'd asked also about the book, about how Derek and I got involved together.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your backgrounds. I know that Derek Cheung he's got a PhD in electrical engineering, and he's worked in the industry from, I believe, the 60s forward, so he's got a background. So I just I think the listeners would like to know a little bit more about that and also about you.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Derek and I, we got together. We are an odd couple. Derek is an engineer and a businessman. He created devices that are put in use in the Hubble Space Telescope. He's just really an incredibly genius man, and really just smart and kindly and kind and good to work with. My background was in a kind of dual background in economics and in writing. I spent a number of years as a business consultant before returning to school, writing scripts for a video game for Nintendo, and later becoming a lecturer in English at California Lutheran University up in Thousand Oaks, California, just outside LA. So we ended up getting together actually because Derek was the CEO of Rockwell Scientific and sold the company to Teledyne and retired to Thousand Oaks, actually. And he'd spent many years thinking that it would be great to have a book that would explain the business end of technology as well as the science and how each device needs to connect and do all kind of plain language. He'd never had these, major multinational corporations, but once he retired, he was able to get started. So Derek worked on his book, and he wrote an edition of it in Chinese, in fact, which is his native language. He was born and raised in Taiwan before coming to the States for college. And the book did really well, and he wanted to work on an English language edition and update it and make it more, accessible, more of a popular book. It could go beyond the classroom and be equally, comfortable in the boardroom or the living room. And so he looked around to find someone with writing skills and a writing background who would understand some of the business end and be able to help bring the project to fruition. And that's how he found me.
Well, it looks like a good combination. As I read through the book, it's really it's an engaging book. It's not just technical. The stories it's a page turner, I think you call it. Of course, I was reading on a Kindle, so it's a button pusher. So, which is perfect for the show, right? There's so many stories in the book. Yeah, we all know about the different discoveries. We know that the atom was split. We know that from the beginning of time to now. I mean, it's from like static electricity to the iPhone. There's so much in between there, and there's so many different stories. The studio that we're talking from is from Idaho, and in eastern Idaho, near Idaho Falls, on the freeway, it says the inventor of television lives here, Farnsworth, I think his name was. And I believe there's a story behind that. I think he got rooked somehow or something. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, I'm happy to. So his name was Philo Farnsworth. He was a farm boy from the Wasatch Range. It's true. He got the idea. So to back up a little bit, people have been experimenting with moving images with precursors to the television since the very, very early 1900s. But they were going about it all wrong. They were trying to use an all-mechanical method. If you can think about one of those old penny arcades where, you flip your coin in the side and sort of flip a spinning wheel to look at a series of pictures that move as your hand cranks, that was kind of about as advanced as the technology, as the state of technology was for people who were trying to make a television. But this farm boy, Philo Farnsworth, legend goes, he was sitting on a hill, and he saw a tractor going back and forth across the rows, and he thought about the idea of a focused beam of light scanning just like that, side to side, up and down, across the screen. And he thought that's how you could capture and then display images electronically instead of mechanically, and it should work. So this boy, and he was a boy, he was just 15, educated himself in local public libraries and local college classes, and he raised some money and tried to build his first CRT, cathode ray tube television. And if you remember TVs, up until about 20 years ago, they were kind of big and boxy and had a curved screen with a big sort of scoop in the back for where the CRT tube went. That was the state of the television for 60, 70 years afterwards, was what this 15-year-old came up with. And he was not only a visionary, but also unrelenting in his quest to make this thing work. He got glass blowers to build his devices for him, and when he wasn't satisfied with the quality of their work, he taught himself glass blowing so he could make better CRTs and better TVs.
Wow.
It was really neat. It was really something. As it happens, though, and as is often happened, despite being this visionary and inventor, he never really got rich off of his idea. RCA, which was a company founded in part by the U.S. government, it was a semi-private company, to help control the radio business in the World War I era, was able to bring the radio to public attention and to widespread use. And they naturally saw themselves as the company that should be doing the same with the television. So, they had a lot of money, they had a lot of clout, they had a lot of lawyers, all things that this poor farm boy didn't. And though, they did purchase the rights to his invention from him, they really took the lion's share and left him sort of pulled him in the dust, while RCA reaped the spoils from bringing television to the American public and eventually the world.
You know, that little boy on the hill, not little boy, a teenager on the hill, 15-year-old kid. What kind of kid in the, what year was this? It was like 40s or something? Or
No, before that, it was the 1920s.
The 20s. A kid in, I mean, my gosh, Idaho at the time probably didn't have 100,000 people in it, or probably had 50,000 people, who knows. But how does a kid who's 15 years old, I mean, where do you get the books even to read that on? That guy was a visionary for sure. Do you know whatever happened to him?
I do. He, as I said, he was paid somewhat for his the rights to his invention by RCA. Surely not all that it was worth. He continued to have ideas and tried to bring them to fruition, but none were quite as impactful or as revolutionary as the television was, of course.
Yeah, and I tell you what, you when you deal with companies, they don't mind buying something and then moving on. A lot of times it depends on the leadership. They could be heartless. They could be fair. I mean, I'm sure they abided by this contract, and so, you know, a boy in eastern Idaho probably wasn't as sophisticated as, you know, some Chicago lawyer or something at the time. So, you know, that's how the ball bounces, I guess. So.
Yeah, it's really true.
You know, there's other stories in the book. You know, the one that really fascinates me, if you talk to people about the telephone, everybody says, oh, of course, that was Thomas Edison that invented the telephone. And I've run across people who were fanatic Tesla fans, and they say that he stole it or they had an argument. I mean, I know the character of Edison, I believe he was kind of ruthless from what I can gather from some of what I read. There's got to be a story behind Edison and Tesla.
There is. It's a very good one, too. It's a little separate from the telephone one. Edison definitely had a hand in the creation of the telephone. It's commonly attributed to Alexander Graham Bell, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I had that backwards. Yeah.
No. It's Edison invented the carbon button microphone, without which a telephone never would have been possible. But yeah, the story of Bell and the telephone, that's its own whole can of worms. Well, Edison and Tesla, though,
was there something Tesla? I mean, it was the battle between DC and AC, and it's something about didn't Edison Edison, right? That's what we're talking about. Edison, he actually electrocuted an elephant to prove how dangerous alternating current was.
All this is true. All this is true. So basically, Edison, he worked for all of the malice kind of that is attributed to him, and there's no question that he, like the CEO of RCA, was certainly a staunch capitalist and not really afraid of crushing people if it meant getting his vision into the marketplace. He was also tireless and really willing to execute the will to think, to make his ideas and make his visions come to light. So Edison took a look at the light bulbs available at the time, and he said, it'd be great is if there was real electric power to homes and light bulbs could be run by everybody in every home. And he realized, though, that to do that, you'd need three things. You'd need a good quality working light bulb, which at the time, in the late 1800s when he was working, didn't exist. You need a high quality power plant, also didn't exist. And you need a power distribution system to bring the power from the power plant to the people's homes. Also didn't exist. So he was able to work on these three incredibly different problems all at the same time and fashion a working power plant, a working power distribution system, and a really, really, really long life light bulb. He was able to take light bulbs with the longest working life of 8 to 10 hours and extend that 100-fold up to 1,000 hours. And up until 10 years ago, the light bulbs that were in everybody's homes were based on Edison's designs. So it was really something. But there was a problem with Edison's design, and that was that he used direct current in DC in his power plants. Now, DC is what's used in batteries and things like that. And the problem with DC is that as DC power travels across a power line, it loses energy very, very quickly. So to have a DC power plant, you'd need to have it within, a mile or two of customers' homes, or else all of the power would sort of attenuate away on the power line before they ever got to where it was going. So AC, which is the kind of power that we use commonly in our power generation systems today, doesn't really suffer from that problem nearly so much, and there are a number of ways to sort of get around it. So what had happened was Edison had set up his DC power plants and his DC power transmission systems and his light bulbs and, convinced all these people to bring electrification to their homes, and it was nothing short of a miracle. And then he met Tesla, who was this tall, dashing European, and convinced Tesla to leave Europe and come work by his side in America. So Tesla did. And Edison had him working on a number of projects and put him on one project that was so difficult, so hard, that he promised Tesla, perhaps jokingly, that if Tesla solved it, Edison would pay him $50,000 in bonus, which is about the equivalent of $1 million in our time. And Tesla worked hard and solved the problem, and Edison stiffed him. So Tesla, gravely injured by this, vowed revenge, quit his job, and dedicated himself to just beating Edison at his own game however he could. And that was when he started investigating Edison's systems and realized that if he could team up with a backer, which he eventually did in George Westinghouse, he could design and build AC power plants that were much higher capacity and weren't limited by location factors, and could, build massive power plants out where land was cheap and send the power to where it needed to be instead of having to have power plants right in the middle of Manhattan or Chicago or Boise or Los Angeles or wherever. So Tesla went about doing this and bringing this into reality. And Edison, he'd never been beaten before. He never had anyone hoisting him by his own petard, and he became furious. And he dedicated all of his efforts to proving how unsafe this AC power was. And you're right, he did electrocute small animals, an elephant, trying to get the public on his side and against Tesla's AC power system. He even went so far as designing what he called a Westinghouse-style execution, which we now know today as an electric chair.
Wow.
But, of course, these shows of anger only served to give more ideas to Tesla, ways to improve his AC power system, make it more and more safe. And Tesla eventually got the contract to set up the Niagara Falls power station and transmit energy to Buffalo, New York. He got the contract to light the Columbian Exposition at the Chicago World Fair in 1893. And from that point on, that was it. AC power has been the name of the game for power plants the world over ever since.
Wow, but
so Tesla was, in no question, a visionary, but it's interesting that so much of his inspiration was to get back at the former mentor of his, Edison, whose ruthlessness ended up costing him.
Wow. It's funny how vengeance can be something that drives people almost as, gosh, I don't know, almost as hard as almost anything else. But
you're absolutely right. And Tesla ended up eventually going off the deep end. He became so convinced in the power of his ideas, he came up with ideas for heat rays and light rays and pulling electricity from the ionosphere that were failures, but he could never admit to himself that he could ever fail, having just bested Edison. And he ended up dying penniless and alone in a New York City hotel room with his only friends, the pigeons on the windowsill. Wow. So they say, if you're going out hunting for revenge, best dig two graves. And it certainly came true in Tesla's case.
I almost ruined him. There's stories of books of various, like ours, was it RCA that tried to ruin a number of people as well. And one other thing about Tesla, does the book cover any more about Tesla, or is it kind of just that story there? Because I know there's the Tesla coil and those other stuff.
Right. So that's actually more in physics and in the electric lab. It has fewer, a Tesla coil has fewer, what's the word I'm looking for, commercial applications. And so we really tried to focus our book on devices that people touch every day to really take it out of the world of sort of theory and, kind of egghead science and bring it into the popular world where we can all say, oh, that's how that works. I use that every day.
Looking through the book, I didn't get to the end, so I don't know what the end's like. Does the end? What's the future gonna? Given all these inventions, we only covered some of the really basic ones at the start. The semiconductor and how there can be millions or billions or whatever on a wafer or something. and how all that technology has affected telescopes in outer space, the space flights, everything.
Sure.
Did you guys hit on the future? What's the future? Did you make a speculation about where the future is going to take us with all these inventions, kind of how fast things are progressing?
You know, it's funny. No one can really know what the future holds for certain. There are a lot of devices and inventions that show a lot of promise, though. There's things like nanomaterials, like graphene, which is latticed carbon that it's super thin and has any number of applications, from furniture to communications to just about anything you can think of. There's all sorts of interesting ideas in things like non-invasive brainwave monitoring technology. The idea, people have been thinking for years about controlling things with their mind. You think about Star Wars and people, using the Force and things like that. And it sounds far-fetched, but it really may be plausible. You look at someone like Stephen Hawking, who has MS, has been communicating for years by relying on infrared scanners to pick up twitches in his facial muscles to spell out for him the words he's trying to speak. The technology to monitor changes in brainwaves to do things as simple as flipping a switch are starting to become reality. So even if 10 or 20 years from now it would be possible to think, oh, I'd like to have my lights turn on and have it happen, it sounds like science fiction now, but science fiction ends up becoming science sometimes.
Given how fast technology has advanced in the last, oh my gosh, since my lifetime, I remember, of course I'm from Idaho, but we used to dial a telephone with, I think, the first 5 numbers. Now today it's whatever. I mean, there's 10 plus, you got country codes, you got everything else. And then you carry the phone around in your pocket, and it's a camera. It's everything. Now, looking through the book, I see that there's an interesting one, the foundation, how Silicon Valley was started. Can you touch on that a little bit for us?
Oh, absolutely. I love this story. It's amazing how often these great watershed moments in history actually hinge on tiny little bits of chance or seemingly insignificant details. And the founding of Silicon Valley is absolutely one of them. You think of Silicon Valley today as this bastion of technology and invention and power and 60 years ago it was orange groves. It was nothing. And the way that Silicon Valley got to be how it is today is because of someone's mother. So the story goes like this. At Bell Labs, which was a real hotbed of incubation throughout the 20th century, 3 researchers working together developed the first solid-state triode. Vacuum triodes had been used forever, but the very first solid-state triode, also known as a silicon transistor, used in everything from computers to phones to iPhones to anything now, was developed in the post-war war period at Bell Labs. So of these 3 guys, one decided he wanted to be rich and famous. Just being a genius wasn't enough for him. He really wanted to make his mark in the business world. So he secured some funding and decided to start a company to monetize these triodes, these solid-state triodes. And he got funding from a professor at Caltech in Pasadena, just outside LA. And this funder, this professor, assumed that this inventor, a man named William Shockley, would go ahead and start his company in Los Angeles. And Shockley said, hey, look, I'm willing to go to California, but I don't want to go to Los Angeles. I'm from Palo Alto. My mother still lives up there, and she's sick. I want to start the company near her. So he started his company in what is now Silicon Valley, and then there's just Palo Alto, there's just a bunch of orange groves. But he started this company and brought person after person, genius after genius, to his company. And as people left and started new companies, such as Intel, such as the children of that company, like Apple, Hewlett Packard, all of these people stayed where they had already landed, which was this company that just happened to be based where it was, because that's where some guy's sick mother was living.
Well, you gotta like the guy. Oh, he loves his mother, right?
Yeah, well, you got to give him that. By all accounts, he was a horrible, horrible guy to work with. Something of a fame hog and not much of a good manager either. But yeah, he loved his mother. You got to give him that.
Well, yeah, I know a number of people. Well, I won't go there. They love their mother too. Are there any other cool stories like that? I'm thinking about the guy Volta, invented the volt.
Mm-hmm.
He was
sure.
credited that. You got the radar. Tell us a couple other stories. Those are pretty fascinating.
Well, if you'd like, I'd be happy to tell you about Volta. Volta is an incredibly neat guy as well.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that one.
Volta became famous, and you're right, his name is what became the inspiration for the word volt when we're talking about electricity. So Volta was a researcher and physician and professor in Italy at about the turn, or I should say the dawn of the 19th century, about the year 1800. And at that time, there was a huge debate about the idea of animal electricity. Europeans had just discovered creatures like electric eels and noticed that some animals appeared to be able to conduct electricity within their bodies. And it became a serious course of study as to whether electricity was, a fundamental force within the bodies of animals, including humans. And one researcher and contemporary of Volta, this man named Galvani, noted that every time he was dissecting a frog, the frog muscles would twitch as he cut into it. He said, this is proof of animal electricity. And Volta said, no, wait, you're missing something. It's twitching because you're cutting into this frog. You've got this metal knife, and the frog is pinned down onto this metal pan, and so what's happening is a conduction of electricity across the metal. It has nothing to do with the frog. Galvani, who was dissecting the frog, came up with these experiments to show, no, I'm right, and Volta came up with his own to say, no, I'm right, and they kind of bickered back and forth until eventually Volta produced this invention in which he soaked a number of pieces of felt and cardboard in brine, in a solution of water and salt. Think like pickle brine, basically, and sandwiched these slices of felt and cardboard between slices of metal, and then connected this whole stack with a ribbon of copper running along the outside. He called it a voltaic pile. What it really was, though, was just a battery. There was one end, the positive side, and one end, the negative side, and it's got a copper strip connecting them, just like you would have, metal contact points in your remote control. And these discs of metal and soaked cardboard were basically just metal and then salts in solution that would allow electricity to flow across. So Volta said, hey, see what I did? And he actually invented the world's first battery without even meaning to. But what he was able to do is run electrical current across this stack that could be used to power other experiments. It could be used to be turned into heat and boil water. It was the first real portable storage device for energy. And because of all of this, Volta, died famous and rich, and he created this great thing. And Galvani had assumed he was defeated. But interestingly, they kind of both won, because over time, as time progressed and medicine progressed, humans began to learn about the nervous system and the fact that synapses in the human body and all animal bodies are actually electrochemical impulses. So in fact, they were both right. And now the term galvanize that we use today comes from this nemesis of Volta's, Galvani.
It's also in the lie detector, the galvanic skin response, I think.
Right? Absolutely. And it's the same thing, looking for electrical impulses coming across your body.
I had no idea.
Pretty neat, right?
These little things are, like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm sort of a techno geek. I like this stuff. It's pretty fun. Speaking of which, I'm also a history guy. I like the radar in World War II seemed to, I think the Axis powers didn't really have the radar, especially early on. I know England did. They used that to their advantage of the war. I think that's probably a pretty good story. Tell us a little bit more about that one.
So that's absolutely right, too. So interestingly, the inspiration for radar also came from Tesla. Tesla wrote to someone in a position of high command in the Allied forces about his idea for a heat ray gun. they showed it to some experts, including a man named Charles Watson Wyatt, or James Watson Wyatt, I should say, who looked at it and examined the science behind it and said, look, this isn't going to work, but he raises a number of good ideas about long-range focusing of light, and we could use this as a detection instrument. So actually, based on this idea of a ray gun, the British got together and built what they called Chain Home, which was a series of 200-foot-tall posts along their southeastern shore, which utilized the first connected radar system to be able to find airplanes, German Luftwaffe, before they were able to attack and bomb London. And so really the turning point in the air battles of the European theater in World War II came about because of this radar system that was inspired by an actually incorrect but very interesting idea of Tesla's. And then that led to advances in the technology such that it was able to be, radar detection was able to be mounted on planes, which then made it available to detect German U-boats. And that helped establish sea superiority for the Allied forces in World War II. And that then begat the microwave, and then that begat, the systems on planes and navigation, and that begat GPS, and every one of these devices is kind of interesting. It's linked to the next, the next, the next, the next. And it all came out of this one directionally wrong, but really kind of interesting idea.
I love those connections. I mean, we went from Volta, right, all the way through to Tesla and Edison. All those are building upon everything they've learned to that point. You get into World War II, radar. But you had radar. And the radar actually, who knows how the war would have gone, but it definitely helped during the Battle of Britain. It helped save many lives. And just think, there's probably a couple lives out there we don't know that were saved that have now probably invented something else, actually using this lineage of technology to the future. You never know. I love these connections. That would be another good book. I just love those connections that people never know what would have happened if something didn't, if something wasn't invented first. It's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Triangulation. The radar allowed you to triangulate, and see where the airplanes were, send fighters to them. I mean, think about that. That was decisive in World War II. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And every aspect of our life. I mean, even the microwave in our homes exists because that same technology, is researchers were trying to shrink it down to make it airborne and mobile. And these researchers, were able to figure out a way to generate micro radio waves, and found, though, that when they stood near a device, the candy bars in the pockets were melting. And realized, oh man, this gives off heat really, really directly and really, really focusedly. Maybe we could come up with some other use for this. And that's why there's a microwave oven now.
Makes you wonder what they cook.
Some guy didn't think to leave his food in a mess before he walked into work one day.
Yeah, well, good thing for him, because he's being microwaved all day long. He's being cooked himself, yeah.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
I know there's stories. I have a military background. There's stories of, I don't think they do it anymore, but they used to. They put their meals on some of these different radar, mobile radar units, and they would actually put some food on it, turn the radar on, cook their food on the radar. This is before this is the precursor to the radar range, which became the microwave. Scary stuff, really. These guys experimenting like that we're not supposed to. Yeah,
but you never know, right? I mean, I remember reading in kids' books about kids grilling grilled cheeses on their dad's engine block on the drive to work. So
yeah,
who knows?
Right. Well, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you so much. These are interesting stories. Just fun stuff to read as well. Now, I know the book goes into not only just these fun stories, but some of the marketing behind it, some of the entrepreneurship, how to bring something from idea to the market, and that's another side of the story as well. And I don't want to miss something, so I want to give you the opportunity to fill in any cracks we may have missed, and also talk a little bit about the book, if you're going to be anywhere, or how people can get a hold of you.
We're always welcome, or excited, I should say, to talk to folks who are interested in talking to us. I mean, we spent 3 years working together on this book, and Derek had spent another 2 before I'd even come on board. it's really become a labor of love and something we just have a great time talking about. So we're absolutely reachable. Our website is conqueringtheelectron.weebly.com. The book itself, of course, is called Conquering the Electron, and it's just available anywhere. I mean, it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble, it's in bookstores. It's an easy find.
Yeah, I know it's everywhere. It's definitely the Amazon, and I just checked around. It seems to be at Barnes & Noble everywhere. And if people need to get a hold of you, like I said, they can get a hold of you there. We'll have a link on astoundingtalk.com as well. Just go to the post that talks about this show, and we'll have all the connections to there and the authors' information, some biographies, and a way for people to learn a little bit more and get a hold of you. Well,
great.
Well, thank you so much for Eric, for being on the show today. And if you'd like to come back in the future, we'd love to have you and talk a little bit more.
You know, the pleasure was really all mine. I would welcome coming back to chat about this kind of thing anytime.